Hello and welcome to my cozy forest cabin. My name is Grace and this is my home in the rainforest of northern New South Wales, Australia. I felt that it was time to properly introduce myself and how I got to live here. So settle in, maybe grab a cup of tea and we'll have a comforting chat. My partner Byron and I moved from the city of Melbourne, Victoria, back to my hometown when COVID hit. We had already been planning to move in July and the timing got pushed forward. If you know what happened in Melbourne in 2020, you'll agree that we made the right move. Living in the suburbs of Melbourne, we really struggled at times. It was my first time living in suburbia and I felt keenly out of place. Whilst I loved the city life, the culture, and the ease of getting around, I dearly missed nature and privacy. We were also struggling to pay our rent, as is the case with a lot of young Australians at the moment, and Byron had just left his job, and at the time I had a temp job, so we had no idea how we could stay even if we wanted to. We packed up our cars and the home that we had lived in for almost 10 years, and we drove for 2 days back to the northern rivers of New South Wales. If you don't know where that is, it's basically between Byron Bay and the Gold Coast, so right on the border of Queensland and New South Wales on the New South Wales side. The drive from Melbourne was so surreal. There was only us and trucks on the road. It was truly shut down. Rules hadn't really been set in place just yet, but we felt that we only had weeks, if not days, to get out. We stayed overnight in the downstairs of Byron's dad's place in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney. That was our halfway point, as we couldn't afford a hotel. This entire drive, I had Bubba on the passenger seat in her crate, meowing the whole time. It was kind of funny, but she was a real trooper. The final leg of our journey, we got stranded in Grafton at night as a massive storm swept over us. I had no petrol and pulled into a petrol station, but there was no electricity for the fuel pumps. The SES were there and so graciously helped us and called a nearby petrol station that still had power, and they were about to close but stayed open for us. By the time we made it to my dad's place, we were utterly exhausted, and it was close to midnight. We ended up staying with my dad for a while, trying to figure out our next move. At the time, he had a cabin on his property that he was renting to some neighbours. They didn't have to pay rent, but they lived there and did up the cabin that my dad had built himself. To be legal, it had to be under a certain amount of square feet, so it is very small. They had 2 kids at the time, all crammed into this tiny place. At the same time, they were renovating their own house in another town. We didn't know they were going to leave, but one day they invited us up to the cabin and showed us how they had renovated it and let us know that they were moving into their own place. So the fates smiled upon us once more, and we now had our beautiful little forest cabin. We've been here ever since, and I don't know how long we'll be here for, but I hope it's a long time. I love seeing the forest first thing when I wake up in the morning, and the sun is shining through the trees, the kookaburras are laughing, and the birds are singing. So many times Byron and I have looked at each other and said, we love our home and our lives right now. We wouldn't be here without my dad building this cabin in the first place, but we do still pay our much more affordable rent to him. Of course, it's not all roses. Living in the forest can have its downside. You might have heard the planes overhead or the distant highway noise that carries over the valley. More than once I've been humbled by the water tank and its pump. There was also a cyclone last year, the first one in my lifetime in this area, and it was quite scary and we got blocked in by a fallen tree. We've also lived through a great flood in this area. There are frequent blackouts due to trees falling on power lines. Things like that. It's definitely not for everyone, and there's a real DIY aspect to it, that kind of homestead lifestyle. Unfortunately, my garden in Melbourne was better than what I've been able to do here. It feels like I'm constantly battling the elements, the bush, and also the cows. But really, I wouldn't have it any other way. So if you're new here, I usually share a week or a weekend in my life. I'm usually cleaning, cooking, journaling, or reading. You can also find me at the bookstore where I work. Sometimes I travel and visit small towns. Other times it's just my cozy cabin and the forest that surrounds us. So I hope you'll stay for some of my cozy forest diaries in the future. Thanks for joining me.